Before we begin, a quick warning. Tennessee True Crime contains detailed descriptions and images of real-life violence. Some listeners and viewers may find the material deeply disturbing. This content is intended for mature audiences only. And remember, the goal of sharing these stories is not to sensationalize tragedy, but to honor the victims, understand the truth, and give voice to those who can no longer speak for themselves. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Before dawn, Tennessee's highways belong to the unseen. Long before school buses roll and courthouse doors unlock, Interstate 81 carries men and machines through the mountains, tractor trailers breathing diesel into the cold air, headlights cut narrow tunnels through the dark. If you stood on an overpass in the winter of 1995, you would have heard them coming long before you saw them. A low hum, a vibration underfoot. 40 tons of steel moving with purpose and moving without memory. Most people think of highways as places you pass through, but for some, the highway is where life ends. In the early months of 1995, Tennessee did not know yet it was standing at the center of a killing ground. There were no press conferences, no task forces, no warning bulletins tacked to squad room walls. There were only women who did not come home. Women who vanished between exits. Women whose last moments unfolded inside the sleeper cabs of trucks that would cross 3 state lines before sunrise. This story is not about the road itself, but the kind of man the road can hide. A man who blended into traffic. A man who earned paychecks and fuel receipts. A man who waved at way stations and disappeared into the night. This story does not begin with his name. It begins where Tennessee would first be forced to look down, beneath an overpass, along Interstate 81, where a body lay still while traffic rushed past, and where the long haul finally began to leave its dead behind. This is the case of the highway hunter. They say the South never forgets, and Tennessee, she remembers everything. Welcome to Tennessee True Crime, where the shadows of the volunteer state's past meet the stories that refuse to be forgotten. I'm your host, Tiffany Morgan. Each week, we dig into twisted tales of betrayal and violence and mystery, the ones where whispers carry truth and the answers are never as simple as they seem. Let's step into the dark and piece together the clues. Because in Tennessee, some secrets still haunt the hills. This is Tennessee True Crime.
Down through the smoky hollers where the cold wind sighs, footsteps fall where the moonlight hides, whispers over rivers, a secret lost in time. Welcome to Tennessee True Crime.
On March 19, 1995, motorists traveling along Interstate 81 near Kingsport, Tennessee, noticed something unnatural beneath an overpass. It was a woman, partially clothed, motionless. Law enforcement soon confirmed what many already feared. She had been strangled. Her body showed signs of being struck, run over by a large vehicle, likely a tractor trailer. This was not a robbery gone wrong. This was not a crime of passion. This was disposal. The woman was later identified as Rebecca Alice Haynes, 36 years old, from Columbus, Ohio. She had a history of arrests for trespassing at truck stops, one of many women who lived on the margins of the interstate economy. But Rebecca Haynes was more than just a rap sheet. She was a daughter, she was known, and she mattered. At the time her body was discovered, investigators in Tennessee did not know yet that her death was part of something much larger. 2 months earlier, just north of the Tennessee line, a newspaper carrier in Washington County, Virginia, made a terrifying discovery near exit 10 of Interstate 81. It was still early. It was the kind of hour when the road belongs almost exclusively to delivery drivers and long-haul truckers pushing through the night. The carrier noticed something ahead on a residential road just off the interstate. Something pale, something unnatural, lying where nothing should have been. At first, she thought, maybe it's a mannequin. That hope lasted only seconds. When she realized what she was seeing, she did not approach. Instead, shaken and frightened, she drove to a nearby convenience store and called for help, unwilling to remain alone with what she now understood to be a body. What lay in plain view was the body of a middle-aged woman, dumped carelessly, almost casually, as if she were garbage discarded along the edge of the road. She had been strangled. Her right leg bore deep tire marks, patterns consistent with the weight and the width of a tractor trailer. Investigators would later determine that the vehicle had driven over her after she was already dead, further erasing her humanity in death. Detective Kenneth Lee Wilson, supervisor of investigators for the Washington County Sheriff's Department, was awakened at home by the call. Now, with 14 years of experience, Wilson was no stranger to crime scenes, but this was a bit different. Washington County rarely saw homicide, and when murders did occur, they were usually personal and contained and very quickly understood. This scene, however, was none of those things. Wilson was joined by Detective Ross Howard Sheets, who was a 17-year veteran. As the two men went and surveyed the area, the similarities began to surface almost immediately. No shoes, no underwear, dumped beside a major interstate. There were no signs of a struggle nearby, no wallet, no identification, nothing to explain why this woman had been left there or where in the world she had come from. The location raised troubling questions. The body, it had not been hidden. It had been placed where it would be found. Whoever left her there was not afraid of discovery. They wanted distance, not secrecy. The woman would later be identified as Brenda K. Hagee, 45 years old, a drifter originally from Bloomington, Indiana. Now, Brenda moved frequently, following the highways and truck stops that offered fleeting shelter for her, fleeting money for her, but also constant danger. Her clothing was far too light for January in Virginia. Thin fabric, no coat, no protection against the cold whatsoever. It was immediately clear that she had not died where she had been found. She had been transported there. Brenda K. Hagee had not come to Washington County willingly. She had been brought there by someone who knew the roads well enough to disappear before dawn. Now, by now, investigators in Tennessee and Virginia were no longer dealing with isolated horrors. They were staring at a pattern. 2 women, 2 states, less than 60 miles apart. Both left beside major highways like discarded cargo. Both partially unclothed. Both strangled. Both exposed to the elements as if whoever left them wanted them found, but not mourned. This wasn't rage. This was routine. And routine, frankly, is far more frightening. So detectives began quietly comparing their notes across their jurisdictions. There were, again, no press conferences, no task forces, It was just phone calls between seasoned investigators who had seen enough violence to recognize when something was wrong in a way that statistics really couldn't capture. One of them said it plainly. This looks like someone who travels. Highways aren't chosen by accident. Interstates are arteries. They move people, goods, and predators quickly and anonymously. A truck stop is really a temporary town. No one belongs, so no one asks questions. And someone was using that. A witness's canvas produced fragments. A woman last seen climbing into a tractor-trailer cab. Another woman arguing with a man at a rest area, but no license plates, no names, just impressions. Voices that were lost to traffic and time. The victims themselves offered few clues. They lived on the margins of society. No fixed address, no one checking in daily on them, and no one really immediately noticed when they had vanished. And that, investigators knew, was part of why this had worked. Because the killer understood something that was cruelly simple. Some disappearances do not set off alarms. As forensic results came back, the similarities hardened in certainty. The strangulation marks were consistent, the way the clothing had been removed, the absence of defensive wounds suggesting control, not frenzy. This was someone who had done this before and would do it again. The question shifted from who to how many. At this stage of the investigation, the fear wasn't abstract. It was not theoretical. Detectives knew the killer was still out there, still moving, still blending in with the thousands of trucks that pass through Tennessee every night. Every tractor trailer became a possibility. Every rest stop became a crime scene waiting to happen. And yet, nothing stopped. There was no sudden silence. There was no confession. There was no mistake big enough to end it, which meant one thing. He was comfortable. And comfort is deadly. Because comfortable killers, they don't rush. They don't panic. They take their time. They refine their skills, and they move on. As weeks passed, law enforcement began quietly monitoring truck routes and freight corridors and known transient hangouts. But highways don't funnel the way city streets do. You can disappear in any direction, north, south, east, or west. It was like trying to catch smoke. Then another break. Small and fragile, but real. There was a surviving witness. A woman who hadn't been killed. She described a man who seemed very ordinary, so polite, very calm, a truck driver who offered her a ride. He spoke softly. He didn't raise suspicion until it was too late, until the doors locked, until the tone changed, until she realized she was no longer a passenger, but she was his cargo. She escaped, but barely. Her account didn't give investigators a name, but it did give them something more important: confirmation. This wasn't all coincidence. This wasn't chance. This was a man who hunted women who trusted him because they had no better options. And now, law enforcement knew something else too. He wasn't just violent, he was patient. And then came a realization that chilled every investigator involved. They're no longer trying to solve a crime. They're trying to stop one. And somewhere on the interstate, a truck engine is still running. Now, truck driving is one of the most unsupervised professions in America. Drivers operate in near total isolation, alone for days at a time, crossing state lines while the rest of the country sleeps. They move through dozens of jurisdictions in a single week, answering to dispatchers that they may never meet, and laws that change with every mile marker. There are no coworkers watching. There's no supervisors riding along. No one to notice what happens behind a closed door. Truck stops, especially in the 1980s and early 1990s, became their own shadow economy. Neon-lit islands off the interstate where the rules of normal society blurred, where exhaustion and anonymity and cash exchanged hands really without questions. There were places where sex work and drugs and desperation mixed freely. Women, known dismissively as lot lizards, drifted from stop to stop. Many were addicted, many were homeless, some were fleeing abuse, others were coerced by pimps or trapped by circumstance. Few had stability, and very fewer still had protection. Police knew their faces, courts knew their names, but no one really knew their lives. They were arrested again and again, not for prostitution, but for trespassing, for being somewhere that they weren't wanted, for existing in public spaces without permission. Their records grew longer. Their safety did not. When they disappeared, again, there are no press conferences, no candlelight vigils, no urgent bulletins pushed across state lines. Sometimes there wasn't even a missing persons report. Because who reports a missing woman when no one knows where she sleeps? And that silence, the absence of alarm, that's where the danger lived. Because somebody understood this. Someone recognized that highways offer more than transportation. They offered invisibility. They offered victims who could vanish between exits, absorbed into the constant motion of freight and fuel and noise. Women whose lives had already been written off as disposable, which made them perfect targets. Not because they didn't matter, but because the world had decided, long before the serial killer ever arrived, that they mattered less. Near Brenda Hagee's body, detectives recovered a crumpled Winn-Dixie plastic grocery bag. It was an ordinary object, the kind handed out thousands of times a day. Thin, disposable, meant to be thrown away without a second thought. But in this case, it had been pressed close to the victim's face, deliberately positioned, not discarded. Wedged between the plastic and Brenda Hagee's skin was something extraordinary. A single fingerprint. One. Clear enough to be lifted, intact enough to matter. Now, for detectives, this was the kind of evidence that almost never appears at scenes like this. Exposed roadside dumps, subjected to weather, traffic vibration, and time? Almost never. They ran the print through state databases. Nothing. No match, no prior arrest records in Virginia, no known violent offender tied to it, so they went wider. The fingerprint was sent to the FBI, entered into national systems that reach far beyond county lines, across states, across jurisdictions, across years of collection. And still, nothing. Days turned into weeks. Weeks stretched into months. Investigators continued working the case, knowing that somewhere out there, the person who left that print was still moving, still driving, still crossing state lines, still blending into the endless flow of interstate traffic. Then, nearly 3 months after the first body had been discovered, the phone rang. match on the fingerprint had come back. The fingerprint belonged to a man named Sean Patrick Goebel, a truck driver, a profession built on movement, on solitude, on disappearing into the road. For the first time, the interstate had given something back, a name, and with it, the quiet realization that this was no longer just a series of anonymous deaths. This was a pattern, and it had a driver. Now, the night before the arrest, law enforcement carefully coordinated across state lines. Multiple agencies, local police, state troopers, and the FBI had spent weeks compiling routes and schedules and witness reports. They knew Goebel's routine, his cab's distinct appearance, a Peterbilt with the Wild One painted on the back, and even the projected time it would take him to return to his home terminal in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. At 8 a.m., that black Peterbilt rumbled into the Rocky Road Express terminal. Goebel, unaware of the exact reason that he had been summoned, parked his truck and stepped down from the cab. Officers had waited, concealed, prepared, ready for a man who, let's face it, at 6'3" and 310 pounds, could easily overwhelm them simply by size. But Sean Patrick Goebel made no attempt to flee. He was calm, collected, and cooperative. Handcuffs, which normally were sufficient, had to be linked together to secure his massive wrists. He was escorted into the terminal office and later to the local police station, his imposing figure dwarfed only by the weight of the evidence waiting to confront him. Detectives Kenneth Wilson and Ross Sheets began their questioning with precision. They laid out the facts, the bodies, the dump sites, the plastic bag containing the fingerprint. Goebel listened, and he was silent at first. His demeanor was very unreadable, but then, almost casually, he began to talk. His confessions were almost methodical. He admitted to picking up women at truck stops and rest areas, encounters that would begin with conversation and end in murder. Some he strangled with his hands. Others he subdued using the strength of his legs. Each death followed a similar pattern: control, suffocation, disposal along the highway. And in his own words, he described it almost like a routine job, a grim efficiency honed by the solitude of long-haul driving. Now, as he recounted these murders, law enforcement officers took very careful notes, recording every detail, every location, every interaction. It was a chilling revelation. The interstate had not merely been a highway, it had been his hunting ground, a stage on which he enacted a horrifyingly consistent pattern of violence. The confession confirmed the investigators' fears. Brenda K. Hagee, Sherry Manser, and Rebecca Haynes, women found in Tennessee, Virginia, and North Carolina, were all victims of the same man. For Detective Wilson and Detective Sheets, it was a mix of relief and horror. Relief that the person responsible had been identified. Horror at the calculated cruelty detailed by Sean's own words. This was no longer speculation and no longer theory. Sean Patrick Goebel had transformed from a name on a fingerprint match into a living, breathing serial killer and perpetrator of interstate murder. And in the minds of everyone involved, one thought dominated: how many more are out there, unaccounted, waiting in the shadows of the highway? The moment that Sean Patrick Goebel's identity was confirmed, the investigation grew exponentially. What began as a local inquiry into a single dumped body along I-81 quickly became a multi-state operation spanning Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, Ohio, Indiana, and beyond. Detectives Wilson and Ross Sheets found themselves in constant contact with law enforcement agencies from at least 10 states. Each call, each report was a piece of a sprawling puzzle. Missing women, suspicious deaths along interstate highways, and patterns that eerily mirrored Goebel's movements. Hundreds of cases were reviewed. Timelines were cross-checked with his trucking logs. Witness reports from gas stations and truck stops were revisited. Any woman who had disappeared near a rest area or had a history of prostitution or trespassing arrest suddenly became a potential victim. Each case carried a new sense of urgency. The possibility of stopping further murders became intertwined with solving past crimes. The investigators discovered how Goebel exploited the unique anonymity of his profession. Long-haul drivers move across those jurisdictions rapidly, creating gaps in reporting and oversight. Highway patrols and local police rarely connected the dots, leaving a trail of disappearances and unsolved murders that spanned multiple state lines. Coordination between agencies was unprecedented for cases of this type in the region. Washington County, Virginia's detectives became central communicators, fielding hundreds of calls, compiling data, and ensuring that evidence from one state could be shared with another. Every fingerprint, every truck stop report, every missing persons record was scrutinized in hopes of identifying more victims. Now, inside Goebel's truck, police discovered Rebecca Haynes' purse, an undeniable link between him and one of his victims. It was tangible evidence of a crime that had already shaken communities across state lines. But the investigation only grew darker when authorities searched Goebel's home in Asheboro, North Carolina. Inside his home, they found an unsettling collection of women's shoes, underwear, and other personal items. Some of those items were meticulously stored, others just scattered around, all suggesting the possibility of trophies taken from victims of past encounters. Law enforcement agencies from at least 10 states immediately contacted the lead investigators, sharing those missing person reports, unsolved homicide files, and tips from the public. The effort was massive, very well coordinated, and urgent, revealing the staggering potential scope of Sean Patrick Goebel's crimes. Now, Goebel only admitted to 3 murders: Brenda K. Hagee, Sherry Manser, and Rebecca Haynes. The bodies they had found they had direct links to. They would later find out that he had also murdered Lisa Susan O'Rourke and dumped her body along an interstate in Alabama. Yet the patterns, the interstate routes, and the possessions that were found at his home painted a far more horrific picture than it seemed just belonged to these 4 poor women. Investigators believe that these confessions were merely the beginning, a glimpse into the dark and mobile violence of a man who had turned America's highways into his own personal hunting ground. The full extent of the horror remained unknown, and every day of the investigation brought a chilling realization. More victims are likely hidden in the shadows of the roads that Sean Patrick Goebel had traveled, their stories waiting for justice that likely will never come. In Jefferson County, Tennessee, Sean Patrick Goebel faced the weight of the law. The trial was swift, the evidence was overwhelming, and the shadow of his crimes stretched across multiple states, though only a portion could be proven in court. On December 15, 1995, the court delivered its verdict. Goebel was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders tied to Interstate 81. There would be no parole, no early release, and no reprieve. The sentence was as final and as immovable as the highways where he had stalked his victims. In the courtroom, as it often does, silence fell after the announcements. The families of Brenda K. Hagee and Sherry Manser and Rebecca Haynes found a small measure of closure, though it could never fill the void left by their loss. Outside, the highways continued on, indifferent to the human lives that had been broken along their asphalt veins. The sentence marked the end of one chapter in the pursuit of justice, but Sean Patrick Goebel's crimes lingered, a chilling reminder that the full story of the lives that he had touched and in many cases destroyed might never be completely known. You see, the shadow of Sean Patrick Goebel's crimes stretches far beyond those 3 murders he confessed to. Again, across multiple states, a litany of women were found dead or went missing under circumstances eerily similar to his known patterns. Their names, ages, and locations serve as a grim roll call of lives disrupted and, in many cases, stolen. Here are some of them. In North Carolina, an unidentified woman, approximately 18 years old, last seen in Burlington, North Carolina at a truck stop in 1990. Cheryl Mason, a prostitute whose body was found in Guilford County, North Carolina in 1991. And an unidentified woman found in western Guilford County, North Carolina on February 19, 1995. In Ohio, an unidentified woman, aged 20 to 25, found along I-75 in Miami County. Marcia K. Pepper Matthews, aged 25, body found June 12, 1985, along I-71 in Richmond County. Shirley Dean Taylor, aged 26, body found July 20th, 1986, on Route 224 in Medina County. April Barnett, age 19, found December 4th, 1986, along I-71 in Ashland County. An unidentified woman, aged between 20 and 25, found August 10th, 1987, along I-70 in Montgomery County. Anna Marie Patterson, a.k.a. Cindy Lawson, a.k.a. Jenny Morrison, age 27, found March 23, 1987, near I-71 in Warren County, Ohio. An unidentified woman, aged between 25 to 35, found April 19, 1990, near junction of I-70 and State Route 37 in Licking County. Catherine Hill, a.k.a. Wendy Turner, found November 5, 1990, near I-280 in the Toledo area of Wood County. And in Tennessee, an unidentified woman found along I-81 in Greene County, Tennessee. Her body showed severe head trauma. Margaret Sue Goins, 26, of Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, found in Sullivan County, Tennessee, along I-81 near the Tri-Cities Airport. Her body had been run over by a tractor trailer. Anyone with information about these unidentified women or about any of the named individuals is urged to contact their local law enforcement or the agencies handling these cases. Each lead could shed light on the scope of Goebel's crimes and potentially bring justice to those who remain unnamed. It is never too late to help solve these crimes. The haunting possibility remains that many, many more women may have been victimized along the interstates that he traveled. The highways remain indifferent, not caring to honor the memories of those lives lost. Life just keeps on going, oblivious. And of the most recent records, Sean Patrick Goebel is still alive and remains behind bars. He is incarcerated at the Northeast Correctional Complex in Mountain City, Tennessee, serving the sentences handed down for his Tennessee murders. He also received an additional sentence in North Carolina. Now, since his conviction, Goebel has filed post-conviction petitions and sought DNA testing, but his sentences remain in effect. For the families of his victims, the knowledge that Goebel is confined may bring a sense of closure, though the echoes of his crimes continue to haunt the highways that he once roamed. His story serves as a grim reminder of the dangers lurking along the interstates and the lasting impact of a life defined by violence. As the wheels of the interstate hum beneath passing trucks, the stories of Brenda, Sherry, Rebecca, Lisa, and the countless others remain suspended between memory and oblivion. Sean Patrick Goebel is locked away, but the trails that he left, the lives that he stole, stretch far beyond the reach of justice. The highways go on, indifferent, carrying strangers, families, and those who are unaware through the same shadows where he once hunted. And while law enforcement may have caught the man, they cannot rewind the moments stolen, the voices silenced, and the futures erased. Because on those long, lonely roads, behind the wheel of a truck, a monster once rode. And for some, he never stopped. One wrong turn, one hit of the gas, and you might not make it home. This episode, The Highway Hunter, was written and hosted by me, Tiffany Morgan, and produced by Main Street Media. Background music and theme song by John T. Productions. Research support from Court Archives and Murderpedia.org. If you would like to sponsor an episode of Tennessee True Crime, we would love to partner with you. Our sponsors keep our shows funded and running. To support Tennessee True Crime, follow us on Facebook at Tennessee True Crime and Instagram at TN True Crime. You can find case and evidence photos on those socials as well. And if you have a case that you're interested in me covering, please feel free to email me at tntruecrime@mainstreetmedia.llc or reach out on any of those socials. Join me next week as we uncover another Tennessee case that left a lasting mark. Because here in Tennessee, we never stop telling the stories that matter, and some secrets we refuse to let stay buried. Tune in next time on Tennessee True Crime.
Down through the smoky hollers where the cold wind sighs, footsteps fall where the moonlight hides, whispers over rivers, a secret lost in time. Welcome to Tennessee True Crime. Dark tales in the mountains where the mist won't